She was 26 years old, 3 months into medical school, about to become a doctor, and then she started getting tired. Not normal tired, the kind of tired where you can't catch your breath walking across a room. She went to a doctor. He said asthma. She went to another doctor. He agreed, asthma. A third doctor told her it was in her head. A few days later, she collapsed on her way home from class. She wasn't breathing. Her heart wasn't pumping. She was in cardiogenic shock, on the floor, dying. When they got her to the hospital and ran the scans, they found a 16-centimeter mass in her chest, wrapped around her heart. It had collapsed her left lung. Stage 4, large diffuse B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She was 26 years old, and doctors told her she had 3 months to live. That was not the worst part of her story. That was the beginning. Her name is Dr. Dawn Musallam, and what happened to her over the next 2 decades is so improbable, so relentless, and so defiant that by the time I'm done telling you, you will never think about food, medicine, or the human body the same way again. Let's go back to the hospital room. She's 26, stage 4 cancer, a mass the size of a softball crushing her heart. They started chemotherapy immediately, aggressive, the kind that destroys you before it saves you. Then radiation. Then they told her she needed a bone marrow transplant. This was the early 2000s. A bone marrow transplant back then meant total isolation. You're in a sealed hospital room. You're immunocompromised. You can't touch anyone. You can barely leave your bed. She was at the City of Hope in California. And here's the detail that tells you everything about who this woman is. They put an exercise bike in her room, and another one by the nurse's station down the hall. Every morning at 4 a.m., she would sneak out of her isolation room, tiptoe past the other patients, ride that bike, and watch the sunrise. Then she'd go back to her room and study for medical school. She was getting a bone marrow transplant, and she was studying organic chemistry at 4 in the morning on an exercise bike. The transplant worked. The cancer went into remission. You'd think that's the end of the story. She beat stage 4 cancer at 26, finished medical school, became a doctor. Incredible. Roll credits. But life wasn't done with Dawn Musallam, not even close. The chemotherapy that saved her life destroyed her heart. This is something they don't talk about enough. Chemo kills cancer cells, but it also damages healthy tissue. And one of the organs most vulnerable to chemotherapy toxicity is your heart. Dawn developed heart failure. Not mild, not manageable, severe, progressive heart failure. Her heart was operating at 8% of normal function. Let me put that in perspective. A healthy heart pumps at about 55 to 70% efficiency. Anything below 40% is considered heart failure. Below 20% is severe. Hers was at 8. For years, she couldn't run. She couldn't walk for long distances. She couldn't do any of the physical activity that had defined her entire life. The woman who rode an exercise bike at 4 a.m. during a bone marrow transplant could barely climb a flight of stairs. And she went to work every day as an oncologist at the Mayo Clinic, treating breast cancer patients, counseling them on how to live healthier lives while her own heart was failing. She would volunteer at the Donna Marathon in Jacksonville every year, watching runners cross the finish line, runners she couldn't join. And she told herself, one day, if I ever get a new heart, I'm going to run that marathon. For years, she held on to that. By December 2019, her condition had deteriorated to the point where she was listed for a heart transplant at Mayo Clinic. Then she waited for over a year, her health getting worse, admitted to the hospital, wondering if the call would come. And on February 5th, 2021, the call came. A matching heart was available. She's told this part of the story in interviews, and every time she cries. Because a heart transplant is the most bittersweet thing that can happen to a human being. Someone has to die for you to live. She named her new heart Grace. She puts her hand over her chest sometimes, even now, and thanks the donor family. Because they gave her something no amount of money or medicine could buy. They gave her a second chance at being fully alive. Now here's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. The transplant was in February 2021. The first walks were brutal. Her legs felt like concrete. Every step was a fight. She said she remembers thinking, why is this so hard? But the next day was a little easier, and the next day after that. 2 weeks after her heart transplant, she walked out of the hospital unassisted. 3.5 months later, she ran a 5K, her first race in 20 years. And then, 1 year and 1 day after receiving a new heart, Dr. Dawn Musallam stood at the starting line of the Donna Marathon in Jacksonville, Florida. 26.2 miles on a cold, drizzly, windy morning. with a heart that had been in her chest for exactly 366 days. She ran the whole thing. She crossed the finish line. Her colleagues from the Mayo Clinic Breast Center were in the crowd, holding signs, cheering, some of them crying. As best anyone can determine, she became the first person in history to run a full marathon within 1 year of a heart transplant. Stage 4 cancer at 26, heart operating at 8% for years, a transplant, and then a marathon. That is not a medical story. That is a testament to what the human body is capable of when you refuse to give up on it. But here's the part that matters most for you. Because Dawn Musallam didn't just survive, she turned everything she went through into a mission. She's now an integrative oncologist and lifestyle medicine specialist at the Mayo Clinic. She treats breast cancer patients every day. And she does something that almost no other oncologist in the country does. She talks about food. She walks into her appointments with published research, studies from JAMA, data from the World Cancer Research Fund, evidence from the American Cancer Society, and she tells her patients something most doctors won't say. 42% of all cancers diagnosed in the United States are preventable. Not through drugs, not through early detection, through lifestyle. 42%. That number comes from the American Cancer Society's own data, and it aligns with what the World Health Organization estimates globally. 35 to 50% of all cancers are preventable through modifiable lifestyle factors. That means nearly half the people sitting in oncology waiting rooms right now didn't have to be there, and almost nobody told them. Because there's no revenue in prevention. There's no pharmaceutical patent on eating vegetables. There's no billing code for telling someone to go for a walk after dinner. The system is built to treat you after you're sick, not to keep you healthy before you get there. Dawn Musallam is trying to change that. So what does she actually recommend? What does a Mayo Clinic oncologist who survived stage 4 cancer tell her patients to eat? It's not complicated. And that's kind of the point. First, fiber. Massive amounts of fiber. Whole grains, beans, lentils, split peas, vegetables. She calls pulses, beans, lentils, chickpeas, one of the most underrated cancer-fighting foods on the planet. Why? Because fiber feeds your gut microbiome, and your gut microbiome directly regulates your immune system. When your gut bacteria are diverse and healthy, they produce short-chain fatty acids that reduce inflammation, strengthen your gut barrier, and help your body identify and destroy abnormal cells before they become tumors. When your gut is starved of fiber, which is what happens on the standard American diet, that entire defense system breaks down. Second, soy. And this one might surprise you because the internet has spent 20 years telling you soy causes cancer. It doesn't. Dawn specifically addresses this with her patients because the fear around soy is one of the most damaging nutrition myths in modern medicine. The research actually shows the opposite. A major meta-analysis found that soy consumption is associated with better outcomes in breast cancer survivors. Not worse, better. The confusion came from early animal studies using isolated soy compounds at doses no human would ever consume. When you eat whole soy, edamame, tempeh, tofu, miso, the phytoestrogens behave completely differently in the human body than they do in a rat. Dawn eats soy. She recommends soy. The science backs her up. Third, a diversity of plants. She talks about getting at least 30 different plant foods per week. Not because of one magic food, but because diversity is what builds a resilient gut microbiome. Different plants feed different bacteria. The more diverse your gut, the stronger your immune surveillance. She pushes colorful vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, berries, herbs, spices, nuts, seeds. The wider the variety, the better. Fourth, cut the processed garbage. Ultra-processed food consumption has been linked to a 16% increase in overall cancer risk. That's not Dawn's claim, that's published data. Every packaged, chemically engineered, shelf-stable product you eat is feeding inflammation, disrupting your gut bacteria, and creating an internal environment that is hospitable to disease. Your body is either in a state that fights cancer or a state that feeds it. What you eat determines which one. Fifth, move your body. Dawn doesn't recommend exercise as a nice bonus. She prescribes it. She treats it with the same seriousness as a medication. The data on exercise and cancer outcomes is staggering. Regular physical activity reduces recurrence risk, improves treatment tolerance, enhances immune function, and, in some studies, shows effects comparable to certain chemotherapy drugs. Comparable to chemo. From walking. That's not a hippie claim, that's published oncology research. And Dawn lived it. She rode a bike during her bone marrow transplant. She ran a marathon a year after a heart transplant. Movement isn't optional in her protocol, it's foundational. Sixth, sleep, stress management, social connection, and avoiding toxic substances like alcohol. She calls these the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, and she treats all of them with her patients. Alcohol is a confirmed carcinogen. The WHO classifies it alongside processed meat. There is no safe amount for cancer prevention. Dawn tells her patients this directly. Not many oncologists do. Here's what makes Dawn Musallam different from every other person telling you to eat your vegetables. She's not a blogger. She's not a wellness influencer. She's not selling you a supplement. She is a board-certified oncologist at one of the most prestigious medical institutions on Earth. She has survived stage 4 cancer. She has lived with a heart functioning at 8%. She has received a bone marrow transplant and a heart transplant. She has run a marathon on a heart that was 1 year old. And she walks into cancer patients' rooms every day and tells them, much of this didn't have to happen. And here's what you can do right now to change your odds. She once said in a keynote, "I would really love to put all of us out of business. Much of cancer doesn't even have to happen." A cancer doctor who wants fewer cancer patients by teaching people to eat real food and move their bodies. That should be the norm. It's the exception, and that tells you everything about the system we've built. Dawn Musallam didn't beat cancer because she was lucky. She didn't run a marathon because she had good genes. She did it because she refused to accept that survival was the ceiling. She decided that thriving was the floor. And now she's proving, with published research at the Mayo Clinic, that what you eat, how you move, how you sleep, and how you live can change whether cancer happens to you at all. 42% of cancers are preventable. That's not hope, that's data. And the woman delivering that data ran 26.2 miles on a borrowed heart. If she can do that, you can eat a vegetable. If you want the evidence-based protocols and the research the food industry would rather you never read, that's exactly what we send in our free newsletter. Over 40,000 people already get it. Links in the description. And if you're ready to eat the way your biology was designed for, the Ancestral Kitchen Bible has everything you need. No seed oils, no processed ingredients, no industrial chemicals. Code 2026 for 50% off. Link in the description. Share this with someone who needs to hear that prevention is not a fantasy. It's a choice.